class, I wanted to do another video on types of variables. And if you've been looking at the material, you see them in the book, but also they're on each of the projects throughout the course. So for example, on the week 1 project, you are learning how to use the StatDisk program. You download the program from the websites, depending on the computer that you have, and then you will open up a data file, and then you'll copy and paste that data and do some different things. It's just basically to get you oriented and familiar with the StatDisk statistical software package that we're going to use throughout the entire course. Now, on each project, there also are some questions for you to answer. And they usually at the end of each project, there's some questions about variables. And this is important for 2 reasons. One, it takes a little while for students to kind of catch on to types of variables. And also, anytime you run any kind of statistical analysis, even the most simple stuff, you have to understand the variables that you're working with. You cannot run any statistical procedure on any type of variable. So that's really where it all starts. And so we practice that throughout the course. Now here for the project 1 under classifying variables, it asks, would this sugar data be a sample or a population? And one thing to remember always is that if you have a data set, assume it's a sample unless otherwise told that it is a population. So that's the idea of statistics. If we didn't have any samples and we always had all of the population data to work with, we really wouldn't need statistics as a course. So the idea is that most of the time, in fact almost all of the time, you are going to be working with a sample, not a population. So in this class, we will always assume that we're working with a sample. Now, you have to answer some things about variables being qualitative or quantitative. And then if quantitative, are they as a variable discrete or continuous? And then something else related to that, but a little bit different, is this thing called level of measurement. I'm going to kind of go over that to give you an idea. And I'm going to open up a writing tablet, and hopefully it'll work this time. I tried it a little bit ago and it didn't work. Now I'm going to go to Tools, oops, and let's go to ballpoint pen. Now let's see if this works. Okay, again, this is something new that I'm working with, so you have to bear with me on this. Now, again, so we're going to be discussing these types of variables. And when we have a variable, and that's going to be broken down into qualitative or quantitative. Now, the one thing that students mix up the most is that they think about anytime there's a number involved and it has to be quantitative. And that's not necessarily true. Remember, it's the responses that you're eliciting from something that we're trying to identify as qualitative or quantitative. For example, under qualitative, there are things like gender. So what you're doing is asking people maybe on a survey, you're saying, okay, what's your gender, male, female? So the response that they give is non-numeric, okay? Now, we may talk about, okay, well, how many males were in the study? And somebody might say, well, there were 25 males. Just because we're assigning a number doesn't mean all of a sudden it's quantitative. It's the variable itself, gender. What type of response does gender elicit? Well, people either say male, female. Okay, so somebody might ask if, what's your favorite color? And maybe what's your favorite car color, for example? Then, some people might say red, some people might say blue, some people might say green, and see their responses are non-numeric. Now, we may at the end say, okay, most people said red, there were 27 people said red, and 31 people said blue, and 22 people said white. That does not make it quantitative. So again, just because there's numbers involved in this doesn't mean the variable is numeric or quantitative. Okay, again, I want to emphasize that. Very common mistake. So now let's go over to the quantitative data. And quantitative are things like time. It would be numeric in terms of how fast does it take you, say, to get to work in the morning, or how long does it take? And you would say 20. You would have a numeric answer, 20 minutes. Somebody might say 10 minutes or 60 minutes or something like that. So the responses are numbers. How much do you weigh? And you might say 100 pounds or 250 pounds or something like that. So again, quantitative things like distance, time, speed, length, and so on. So under quantitative, that gets broken down a little further into discrete, or continuous. Now, we identified this because of measurement error. We're concerned about it, and when you have a discrete variable, you can think of something that you count. Okay, so under quantitative, not qualitative, we don't break that down any further. So discrete, continuous, or neither. Or if it was a qualitative variable, you would say neither discrete or continuous. Just qualitative. Quantitative, you have to decide, are you counting it like money? Money is a discrete variable because we count money. We don't measure how much money we have, we count it. The number of empty parking spaces in the parking lot, you would count those up. 10, 15, 20, whatever, but you would count 1, 2, 3, so on. So we don't assume there's any kind of measurement error because we're not measuring. A continuous variable is something we measure. Okay, so weight, right? You use a scale. You don't count how much you weigh. You measure it with a scale. You don't count how long something is. You measure it with a tape measure. You don't count how fast you're driving in your car, right? You measure how fast you're going with the speedometer, and so on. So very important to distinguish between those two again. So under variables, right, you're going to talk about, first of all, is it qualitative or quantitative? Think about the responses that you're going to get. And then under quantitative, right, are you counting up to get that number, or are you just measuring with something? Okay. Now, the other thing I want to talk about briefly is level of measurement. Now we have ratio is the highest level. When you're working with quantitative data, you're going to almost always be at the ratio level. Interval, there's very few examples that we would run into in this class of interval level of measurement. So if you're working with quantitative, it's pretty much ratio level, okay? It has a true zero. Interval is a little bit controversial, but if you think of temperature, temperature is at the interval level because 0 degrees outside would still mean that there's heat, right? You can have below 0 temperatures. So 0 doesn't really represent 0. And the implication of that is you cannot perform meaningful ratios. For example, if it's 40 degrees outside and it cools down to 20 at night, you know, it wasn't twice as hot out, or it's not half as hot out now. 40 is not twice as much 20 when you're working at the interval level, even though that seems kind of strange, but that is true. Okay, so ordinal level is groups in order, like letter grades, A, B, C, D. You're putting people into groups. You have a group of A's, a group of B's, a group of C's. And there's definitely an order there. Movies, like 1-star movie, a 2-star movie, a 3-star are all grouped, you know, but we know one's better than the other. 4-star movies are supposed to be better than 3-star movies and so on. So there is an order involved at the ordinal level. And then nominal is just groupings with no order. So when we were over here with qualitative data, qualitative, we said gender. Well, gender would also be considered nominal level, because again, nominal level is just working with groups, and we have gender, different groups, color, favorite color, we would be at the nominal level. Again, you just have different groups, one's not better than the other. So we consider these two more at the qualitative types of variables, and definitely these two are going to be up with the quantitative types. So when you think about responding to those answers, you know, try to think about the response. Again, is it numeric or not? Are you counting or measuring? And does it have a real true 0 point, or are we just putting things in groups, which are going to be mostly down here? Okay. All right, that's it for this video.